it's wise to have a format and understand where you're going, as opposed to just going off on a new adventure and hope that it takes you into a good place.
The hardest part is figuring out what you want to master.
Focus on your product.
Can you tell somebody that they suck?
You got to just go, this is exactly what I want to do for a living.
You can't even tell somebody that their breath is life.
Do you think that red jacket would fit on me? Should I be photographed in that young and red?
You know what we'll do when we're done?
But I should be like talking in it.
All right.
What is what I'm saying? I should be.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. Now I'm hip, man. Now I'm hip.
Listen, if you get too hot though,
no, this is cool. This is cool.
To bail out. Oh, you are hip as can be. There you go. All right, a little higher, and there it is.
I didn't even realize we had that.
Yeah.
He spotted it.
Very cool, man. It's a very cool jacket. Look at that, man.
Oh, you are styling, Cal.
Should I close it up?
No, because you want to know what's happening is the
what's
lines of your shirt are perfectly sort of accentuating.
Okay, that's great.
You got it, man. You nailed it.
There you go.
You nailed it.
No, I'm gonna give you a fashion show.
I like that. Our little clips for Instagram are gonna be real fashionable. Yeah.
All right.
I like that.
Well, let's make sure the lines are. I mean,
it looks like you planned that.
Ever have done this.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Put on the jacket?
I even been thinking, you know what? I want to talk to you about this. I put out my first video on Instagram this morning.
Uh-huh.
All right.
What were you doing? Like talking into the camera?
No. It's an Instagram of me at breakfast with Larry King.
Yep.
And I went on this all fruit and vegetable diet, which Larry's like an old school guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, I'm bringing, we eat at like delis in the morning, and now I'm bringing like dragon fruit breakfast table. You know, and he's like, what
the hell are you doing?
He's smacking his forehead. Yeah. So I put it up there because I'm so late to all this social media.
Yep.
I'm so late to trying to look cool that I just realized literally 2 or 3 days ago, I said, okay, this week, I'm throwing myself in it. That's why I'll wear the jacket.
Yeah.
I'll look cool.
Yeah.
I'll put up a video on Instagram.
Yeah. You gotta own it.
Yeah.
But man, I will say you have the natural like style. Like you're always wearing the fedoras and the cool glasses, and like even when I looked up your photos online, like you're a pretty cool guy.
See, I had no idea this.
I'm just saying, don't count yourself out.
Don't count myself out.
Maybe a jacket here and there might spice it up, but you are starting off from a pretty good point.
Like a jacket, meaning like a sports jacket.
Well, I'm saying like sure, if you're in a throw on the varsity,
explore
a little.
To me, what I love about this is it's old school.
Yeah, it is very much.
See, I can't do anything new school because it will sort of betray me.
It's very timeless. The Letterman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
And then the red pops.
It sure does. And especially when we get this video with the red neon and the red, you're going to be killing it.
Oh, man.
Let me ask you this. What changed 2 years ago? Why did you say 2 years ago you wouldn't have done this?
Well, do you know much of the story? I know you interviewed Alex. Did he tell you any of the story?
Yes and no. So let me tell you what I do. What I do is I skim kind of top line notes so that so I'm not completely in the dark and I don't say or miss anything stupid, but I also want to be genuinely curious.
Right.
So I know very limited information.
Okay. So I don't know if you want me to tell the story are we going?
Yeah, we're going.
We're going?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right. So there's 2 moments that have come to mind just since we started talking. And even the fact that I'm now conscious. Okay. Is the film?
Yeah.
Is
the film funny how that changes.
Like that was not me.
Yeah.
That was not me, but I'm now thinking in this way.
Yep.
And I can give you the story from about 40 years ago, or I can give you the story from 2 years ago. Whatever you want. You want to back into it or you want to forward into it?
You know what I want to do? Can we, for the sake of story flow, can we finish what we were talking about before and
Okay.
then go back to the
All right.
beginning?
Good.
So before we started rolling, and the reason why I said let's roll and the thing's going to pick up in the middle of a conversation is because we were having a great conversation about
Akron,
Akron, Ohio, where I'm
Cedar
from,
Rapids,
Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where you're going soon.
Sandusky, Ohio.
Gotta love them. And we were talking about like the mentality and sort of do people there not do things like create podcasts and sort of step out of that realm because they think they can't make a difference? Are the people who thought they could make a difference already moved to New York, LA, that sort of thing? But I'm having trouble remembering exactly what point we were on, right? We were talking about you going to Cedar Rapids and that you were going to do a podcast there. Oh, you said that you faced that moment in your own life.
That's right. When I was 22 years old.
And where are you from?
So I'm originally from New York
Got it.
and went to school at the University of Missouri, Columbia Mo, which is right in the middle of the country, and started out working for newspapers, Miami Herald. And then very quickly, I was still 22 when the sports columnist of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch took another job. Now, it's very hard for people now to understand what that was like. But back in 1980, that was the job because I think ESPN was just starting, but there was no explosion of sports that everybody could just tap into on your phone. You want to know what was going on. The only way you really knew was to pick up the paper. And there was one person in every newspaper who had the plum job, the sports columnist. He could say what he wanted. And he was out there maybe 5 times a week, maybe more. And everybody in the town knew this guy. This guy was like bigger than the mayor because the mayor would come in, get voted out, but the sports columnist, he was there. He walked in the locker room, everybody knew him. He went into the bars afterward, everybody knew him. And that's what I wanted to be.
At 22.
Well, it's what I want to be as a kid growing up.
Coming up.
And then all of a sudden, I do everything I can to be that person. And I take a job in St. Louis. Here's the problem. The staff there, they all want to be that same columnist. And most of them were 36, 37. And basically, they were going to get one shot. When I got brought in, the deal was, Cal, we want you to be that person. Now, I'm 22, working in a staff of 36, 37, 40-year-old. All right. And so they know, everybody knows there's going to be people who are going to be saying, hey, you can't just come in here and take this. You got to pay your dues. And so the people who brought me in said, look, we can't give it to you right away. But if you just start out and be the second person on the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team and all the sports, and you learn it, and then after a couple of years, everybody will have adjusted to it, and the job is yours. All you got to do is keep hitting it out of the park. And so I'm doing good. And it really, I actually get to the point where I see my face in the paper. I have a column. It's not an everyday column, but
it's there.
It's there, and I can see the future. And I realized at that point, oh man, I got to make a decision. Because if I keep going down that road, basically that's my life. That's house, wife, kids. This is everything that I'm going to do for my entire life. It's all set out before me. And it's very comfortable. Or I could get in my little Honda, pack all my possessions, and drive to New York and take part in an amazing new sports magazine called Inside Sports, started by the guy who later really was the creator of SportsCenter.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to say yes or no.
So you really had that moment.
It was one of the principal moments in my life, and I got in the car and I just drove to New York, no job. I called up the editor and basically said, "Hey, look, if I come in, will you just like make sure like I don't starve?"
Yeah, yeah. It's a
And
pretty easy request.
and he said, "Yeah, come on in." And so this office is at the Newsweek building. Nobody even knows what Newsweek anymore is, but it was big magazine, Time and Newsweek, big news weeklies of the day. And I show up, get a pass in the lobby, and as I'm walking to the elevators, these guys wheel in case after case of beer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just moving with this cart into the elevator. I hit the floor. They don't even press the button. They're going up to the same floor. Door opens, we go out, and they're headed into the office of Inside Sports too. And I just followed the beer in, and there was this huge party, and that was that.
Man.
We all headed over to the Cowboy Bar after that, and because of that, now I'm sitting down with Hunter Thompson, like one of the greatest writers of his age, and David Halberstam, Pulitzer Prize winner. Now, I don't know how many people like know how important these people were at the time, but their words were magnificent, and that's where I wanted to be. And so I was in New York. And a year later, same thing happens.
Another crossroads?
Another crossroads where this magazine, it's a great magazine, but it was maybe a little ahead of its time. And the owners, it was the Washington Post, owned it at the time. They pulled the plug on it. And so now I got to make a choice. Like, do I think, better go back to St. Louis? Better find that place that I wanted to be? Better to look for a job at Sports Illustrated? Find something that's comfortable? And I just called up my mom and dad, and I told my mom, I think I'm just going to take off and figure this out because I didn't know what to do, where my life was going. And my mom said, that's a great idea. And little did she know when she said it that I wasn't going to be coming back for 10 years, but I took off around the world.
Really?
Yeah, just started traveling.
Can I ask you one question before we go too far past it? What do you think made up your mind? Because we were talking about all this stuff about the people who leave, the people who don't. What do you think made up your mind that you were in line to essentially receive this job that you had dreamed of in St. Louis? And you could have been the man in St. Louis, but you still decided to pack up the Honda and go for like a pretty risky, who knows what'll happen situation. What do you think do you remember like what put you over the edge?
I think it's a great question because you don't know unless you're in the moment, you feel something in your gut. And believe me, I have followed that gut decision later down the pike, and it's taken me in wrong directions. But I've always followed it. Because it always spoke to me of, you know what, Cal? There's a greater story out there. If I stay here, I pretty much know what's going to happen in my life. Now, a lot of people are very comfortable with that. And if they are, God bless them. But for me, I realize now as we're talking, my life has been always governed by the story. I gotta find a great story.
You know what's incredible is I did a podcast about a month ago with this guy named Ed Milet, and he put it in these really interesting terms where he said that he thinks that when you die, you meet the version of yourself that you could have been. And you either look at that guy and say, man, look at that guy. He has all this world travel and he's, blah, blah, blah. He has all these experiences and knowledge. Or you look at that guy and you say, that's my twin. You're looking in a mirror and you really became the most fullest version of yourself that you could have been. And for him, it's like sort of always chasing the fullest, he doesn't want to settle at this lower level when he feels like he could go expand himself a little more, and whether it's add more to the world or soak more in. It was a really interesting way of looking at it, where I'm like, man, that's cool. I don't ever want to meet that version of myself one day and be like, oh shit, you were lazy, or you were too scared to go follow your gut, or you know what I mean?
I think if I had the same experience,
Yeah.
the other version of me would jump up and hug me
Yeah.
and say, "Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for going on the ride."
Yep.
Because in the end, what do you have? You only have your time.
Yeah.
And look, if I hadn't made those decisions, if I hadn't made the decision to leave St. Louis and go to New York and leave New York and then go around the world, I never would have met the woman who became my wife
Yeah.
on a bus at midnight on the way to the most beautiful beach in the world,
In Brazil?
in Brazil.
Ah.
And if I hadn't had that moment, I wouldn't have had my 3 kids.
Yeah.
And who knows where this all goes? My middle daughter is now off in China on an internship. I don't know where all this is taking us.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It sure is.
And yet, some side of me is always very cognizant that, if you would have just settled,
Mm-hmm.
things might be a lot easier for you.
Mm-hmm. But what I wonder is this, because I know that feeling and I know that mentality. My question whenever I have that thought is, I have seen some of that feeling of like people who maybe are trapped in their circumstances or their small town or whatever it may be, and they're constantly just assaulted by this feeling of what could have been. And I think that I would rather any day live with the feeling of things could be simpler than what could have been. That what could have been feeling seems, even if you were the king of St. Louis and you were now just running the show, sports, whatever that turned into, and you were the coolest guy in town, I think you always would have been like, man, I wonder what I could have been. And that's a terrible feeling, I think.
It's like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
though that was turned on its head by Frank Capra, the director,
Mhm.
so that you really appreciate the guy who stayed behind,
Mhm.
the guy who helped everybody in the community,
Mhm.
the guy who made the community better. And here's the thing,
Mhm.
that is not to be overlooked,
Absolutely not.
because I show up as the traveler.
Mhm.
I don't resonate in people's minds as the host.
Mhm.
I resonate as, where you been, Cal?
Yeah.
What's up? What happened now? What happened now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think maybe, who knows, maybe in my last act, I will search for that position as host,
Mhm.
where I can combine everything I've done traveling with being in one place and having travelers come to me.
That'd be a good ending to the story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You traveled, did all these things, and then you ended it with that. And to your point, like I'm not by any means saying that everyone in a small town is too scared to leave. That's not it. But I think that a lot of people are able to kind of hide behind that when really they want to be out there and they want to go. And think of all the people whose lives you've been able to enhance now outside of St. Louis and across the world, right? Because you've put yourself in these uncomfortable situations. So I think that there are, like my parents, for example, they love Akron, Ohio. They met in high school. They're incredible. They don't want to travel the world, and that's where they belong.
They've got their friends that they see all the lifelong friends.
And they love it. And they love that. And that's 100% great. I don't ever want to come off like everyone who stays is too scared to leave, but I think for the ones that feel it, it's a bit of a tragedy if you don't. At least go see. Maybe you spend a year in New York, you get your butt kicked. New York sucks. It's crazy. There's too much going on. You move back to St. Louis, you're happy. But at least you knew.
And not only that, but you come back with some stories.
Some good ones. 1 year in New York can get you some good stories.
Yeah, and so much of this depends on everybody's inner feelings.
Yep.
There's no mathematical formulas to this.
Mhm.
It really is a matter of people looking into themselves and saying, "How do I want to live my life?"
Yeah.
I give a lot of talks about how changing your questions can change your life.
Yep.
And I really think it's as simple as that.
Yep.
It's as simple as saying, "Okay, what if I took this 1 year and moved to LA?
Mhm.
What if I took this 1 year and moved to Kuala Lumpur?"
Mhm.
You have no idea what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't work out, you come back. I'm gonna tell you a story, and this, to me, is the saddest rendition of the story you're talking about.
Okay.
There's a guy I knew when I started to travel around the world,
Mhm.
said, "Oh, that's just amazing. That's great." I said, "Hey, look, let's come along."
Mhm.
He said, "Oh, I couldn't do that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I'd be giving up my job." And I think I don't know if he's still in that job, but I think he stayed in the job
Yeah.
all his life, and I don't think there was much to look forward to
Mhm.
in that position.
Mhm.
And probably he would be the guy you're talking about whom who met that person in heaven or wherever you meet
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
They might say, "Wow, I wish I'd done it a little differently."
Mhm. Ugh.
But I don't know
Yeah.
because he married a beautiful woman,
Yeah.
has a great kid. Maybe in the end say, "You know what? I'm grateful for what I have." So
Yeah.
there's no rights or wrongs here.
No, no. It's just interesting. Um, so take me with you around the world.
All right.
You pack up and that was a similar feeling of like, well, why not? Like, how at that age did you find the sort of courage, I guess, to just be like, this is what I'm gonna do?
A lot of it is the time.
Mhm.
I think growing up in the 70s, like after it's so hard to explain to people who are younger, like
Mhm.
what the 60s was like
Mhm.
and how tumultuous it was. And then like the freedom of the 70s. Like there's Coachella now,
Mhm.
but there was no Woodstock before Woodstock,
Yeah. That's true.
where suddenly, I don't know, was it 600,000 or 1,000,000 people showed up on a huge campground to listen to music,
Yeah.
and you had these musicians like Santana that nobody had ever heard of come out on a stage, like, after dropping who knows what,
Uh-huh.
and thinking to himself, like, "Oh, man." I don't think he even knew if he could, like, control what he was about to play.
Mhm.
And then it just bursts out of him,
Mhm.
and everybody's going crazy. And so there was that feeling of go out and let it rip,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
That was what I grew up with.
Yeah.
So when I was 17, I went off to college. I couldn't wait to get out
Yeah.
and be in the world, even though I went to like a place in the middle of the United States that is a college town.
Yeah.
It was by comparisons to New York very slow, but to me, I didn't hang around with cows before.
Yeah.
It was all new.
Yeah.
And so I came up with the experience of what's out there.
Mhm.
And what happened was, because this magazine had folded, a guy who I had met while working on this magazine, another young guy, his name was Gary Smith. He became one of the great sports writers of all time.
Mhm.
He also was in a similar situation. So we took off kind of together.
And what
And
was the plan? Like, let's just go for it? Where'd you go first?
well, the first thing we did, he went before me. He said, "I'll meet you over there." I was tidying up some details.
Mhm.
And so he had an amazing experience that actually influenced everything that came after it. So he's goes to Italy, and for whatever reason, I'd have to ask him. He just decides to walk up to a bus station and ask for a ticket to the next destination. Doesn't care what it is. Doesn't care where it's going. He just asks how much money it's going to cost, takes the ticket, gets on the bus, and it takes him to a place where he gets out. He's just got his bag and he just starts walking. And a guy in a car drives by and pulls over and picks him up. The guy's name, fondly, was Psycho Killer because of the song. Can you do that on a podcast? Or you get sued for the rights.
I think you're fine. I think you're
I
clear.
can do the
Yeah, because we're not charging, I think.
Okay,
Right?
great. All right. And so the Psycho Killer was an amazing guy who basically brought Gary to this little town called Castle Viscardo. And as soon as Gary walks in, he's like, Gotti! Everybody in town knows him. They all love him. And they give him a place to stay. And he's out there picking grapes with them. And they just invite, everyone wants to have him in their home because they don't get a foreigner so much. So I fly to, never forget, landed in Luxembourg because Iceland Air had these cheap fares. It stopped in Iceland. They were hoping to get you to stay or at some point. And then they would go over to Luxembourg. So it was the cheapest fare. We got these tickets. And I met Gary at Oktoberfest in Munich. And we had a great time there. You just at these tables singing with these iron four-armed waitresses who can hold like 8 gigantic steins filled with beer in each hand. And we're throwing back these beers. It was just wonderful. And he says, you got to come to Italy. You got to come. You got to see this place. So he takes me back to Castle Viscardo. And immediately, as soon as I walk in, Calvino! And we're picking grapes. We're helping them with bricks in the brickyard. And every night, there's these gigantic meals and drinks afterward. And I realized that, and this really gets the point of what you were talking about before, Akron. The people living in these places would love to have a chance for somebody who has a love of life and a love of telling stories to just out of nowhere drop in. And everybody wants to have you at their house. Everybody wants to show you the food they make best. The homemade schnapps that they make best. And so that is what started the whole journey for me, where I would just get on buses and trains, buy the tickets without knowing where they were going. And I had to be very careful about it, though, because I didn't have much money. So what I would do is I learned to walk down the aisle of a train and look for empty seats and look at the people next to those empty seats, because I had to find somebody who looked interesting, somebody who I thought I could trust, somebody who I thought would be able to trust me. Because once I picked that perfect empty seat, I knew I was going to sit down, the train would start rolling, and a conversation would get moving. And by the end of that ride, by the end of that conversation, I needed that person to invite me home. Because I had no money to spend in hotels night after night.
That's so good. I wasn't even thinking about that. I wasn't even thinking that's where you were going to go.
Let me tell you how seriously I took this. All right. I'm walking down that aisle and I see a beautiful woman sitting next to an empty seat. She's got no wedding ring or engagement ring on. She's smiling at me. Could be a supermodel. I'd walk right on by.
Why is that?
I mean, let's face it. I knew she wasn't taking me home. But that old grandma in the back,
Yeah.
if I got into a conversation with her and she saw that I couldn't understand the language,
Yeah.
and maybe she started to be worried, somebody may try and take advantage of this guy, I better protect him.
Mm-hmm.
She would invite me home.
Yeah.
And so that's how the trip began to unfold. And then once people began to take me home, the first thing they would do, call up the neighbors, call up their friends, distant relatives.
Yeah.
You got to meet this guy. Come on over Saturday night. We're going to have a big party. Now I'm staying there, showing me around the town. There's going to be a big festivity. And now the whole house is filled with people. And I'm getting to meet all of them. And they want to show me where they live.
Uh-huh.
And so everybody just starts passing me around the world.
Yeah.
From city to city, different countries, because now people have met people maybe if they ever traveled. And all of a sudden, I'm hooked up everywhere. Now, this is before cell phones.
Yep.
I did not even take a camera with me because I wanted this experience to be so authentic. I didn't want to be stopping and taking pictures.
Yeah.
Big mistake. I wish I'd had an iPhone and could
Yeah.
have recorded those moments.
Yeah.
A terrible blunder on my part. But look, it was a different me and it was a different time.
Yep.
And so basically, this took me around the world. Occasionally, I would run out of money and I would go back to America, say hello to my folks, family, friends, and I would wrangle up a magazine piece,
Uh-huh.
make a few $1,000 and then go out again.
Really?
And that's basically what happened for 10 years until I got on a bus in Brazil at midnight, about to head to the most beautiful beach in the world.
Uh-huh.
And if you want, I'll tell you a little bit of the story.
Please.
All right. So basically, this beach is called Jericoacoara.
Uh-huh.
It's in the very, very north of Brazil.
Uh-huh.
It's like by the equator. It's not by Rio or Sao Paulo. It's kind of more in the south.
Got it.
And so when I'm traveling around, I hear about this beach. Like, you got to go to Jericoacoara.
Uh-huh.
And like, why? And it's the most, it's got like the sand dunes from the Sahara set next to the most crystal waters of the Caribbean.
Uh-huh.
It's a different place out of a different time.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even take money there. I mean, there's an isolated fishing village.
Huh.
You want to get there, you got to travel on a crude sailing vessel. You got to go on muleback. You got to bring a sack of rice that you carry on your shoulder, which you will barter with a fisherman when you reach Jericoacoara for a hammock in front of their little home, and they'll feed you, and you got to get there.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I got to get to Jericoacoara. So I get to a point where I'm at the closest city to Jericoacoara. It's called Fortaleza. And as luck would have it, I don't need a muleback. I don't need to ride on muleback. I don't need a small fishing vessel, because the first travel agency with trips to Jericoacoara has just been established.
Oh, man.
It's like I arrive on a Tuesday, the first bus leaves Friday at midnight.
Yeah.
I get one of the last tickets
Mm-hmm.
because people have heard about this and they're coming from all over Brazil. And I don't know if mine was the last ticket, but all I know was Friday comes along and a woman in Brazil calls up the travel agency, says, I'd like to get a ticket to Jericoacoara. And the guy said, I'm sorry, but we're out. Every seat's been sold. It's our first one. She said, but I got to go. And he said, well, in 2 weeks, our next one's going. And she said, no, I got to go tonight. And he said, but there's no tickets. She says, well, if somebody decides that they can't come, like, can you call me back and I'll buy the ticket? He said, absolutely. She doesn't wait for him to call an hour later. Any tickets? No. An hour after that. Any tickets? Every hour on the hour, she's calling him up to see if anybody has decided they can't go.
Yeah.
Finally, at like 10 o'clock at night, she calls up. Any tickets? The guy says, no, I'm sorry. But you know what? I can tell how much you really want to go to Jericoacoara. How about this? For half price, you can stand in the aisle. Great, she says. She runs off to the bus station. Midnight comes, it's completely dark at the station, and the bus doors open. I board, take a seat on the aisle in the middle of the bus. Everybody else takes their seats, bus is packed. And just after midnight, the door's still open, and this silhouette comes up the steps and starts walking down the aisle and stops right next to me. I can't even see her face. All I see is her silhouette. But I look up and I know there she is. There she is. That's it. And I say to her, can I give you my seat? No, she says. And now I know even more. There she is. And that is the woman who became my wife.
Holy cow.
So if I hadn't been constantly pushing and getting on these buses and seeing where the trip was taking me and meeting the person who told me about Jericoacoara, and having that instilled in my mind, so that it was more than a year or two later when I ultimately did go there. I mean, I got 3 kids because of this.
Yeah.
And it was just because I was willing to go. It's like Robert De Niro told me once when I interviewed him, if you don't go, you'll never know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. And I just feel like there has to be this feeling when that's how you met your wife, right? Where it's like, you were like, I traveled the world to find the perfect woman.
That's
you know what I
right.
mean? Like, that has to feel very like, I have no question in my mind because I traveled all over the world. And the moment I saw you, I knew you were the one.
That's exactly how it felt. Now, of course, like, you're feeling that in your gut, but still you've got to see who she is,
You still gotta
how
see her
she
face.
is. Yeah, I hadn't even seen her face at that point. I just know. But then you see when we got off the bus, how she interacted with other people, the kindness, the goodness. And again, we don't even really speak the same language. I mean, my Portuguese is very limited.
Yep.
She didn't speak English. So we're not, and look, to this day, we really don't communicate through words.
Yeah.
I said, people ask me, what's the secret of marriage? And I say,
Different
just,
language.
yeah, have a different language. You never understand each other. And you just, okay, that's cool. That's cool. As soon as you really can understand each other,
that's when it gets tricky.
that's when it gets tricky.
Yeah. Oh, man. Let me ask you this. What do you think? I mean, I'm sure that the like lessons learned and the character building and all that stuff was like just insane and impossible to even describe. But like, if you could pinpoint it to one skill or one thing learned during all of those travels for 10 years,
Whew.
could you give me one or two? You know, like something that you just think like, man, had I not done that.
Well, you know, so many things quickly come to mind that are like technical things about traveling,
Mhm.
like never keep all your money in the same place,
Mhm.
because somebody is going to try and take it.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing that occurred to me. But really, you're looking for something bigger. You're looking for
Well,
some.
and not necessarily like I'm even looking for like my, communication skills or my ability to blah, blah, blah,
All right,
something like
fine.
that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. And I give this, I talk about this when I give speeches,
Mhm.
and it's always aim your first question for the heart,
That's exactly what I was looking for.
because if you do that, you will be able to make a connection.
Mhm.
If you aim your first question at the head, you may not be able to make the same kind of connection.
Mhm.
A question to the heart, even if I ask you something like, drama,
Mhm.
where's the best place to get ice cream around here?
Mhm.
Now, most people like ice cream.
Mhm.
You like ice cream?
I do like ice cream.
Okay.
Yep.
So maybe there's a place around here that you're going to start talking about.
Mhm.
Maybe you're going to tell me about a memory you have with your parents back in Akron
Mhm.
when you were a kid eating ice cream.
Mhm.
And that's going to open up your family, your background. I'm going to learn so much about you
Mhm.
just by asking that question.
Yep.
And I've used this over and over again. For 20 years, I interviewed the icons who've shaped the world for Esquire magazine.
Mhm.
And I always went in and aimed my first question for their heart
Yeah.
to get them to relax and trust me. And I learned this traveling around the world on those buses.
Yeah. You think you became an interviewer from traveling around the world?
100%.
Yeah.
It forcing myself to step into an empty seat
Mhm.
and look at somebody I've never met before, maybe who doesn't even speak the same language, and get them to trust me enough to invite me home. I mean, if you can do that,
Yeah, you can do anything.
you can interview anybody.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's got to be authentic and genuine. You got to really care about the answers that you're getting
Yep.
from the other person. If I went in there thinking, okay, how am I going to sucker a night's worth of room and board out of somebody?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
It worked because I really wanted to know how they live.
Mhm.
And it worked because I was willing to sleep in straw
Mhm.
or in a mat made of all kinds of animal skins. And
Mhm.
it didn't matter because I wanted to see what that was like.
Mhm.
And so if you will enable your childhood curiosity to follow that question, the question you've aimed at somebody's heart, you will connect with somebody.
Mhm. Yeah, it's something that I've even learned, even from starting this podcast, right? Because I didn't really consider myself any sort of natural interviewer, but I was naturally curious about these things. But I think the difference of actually creating an hour-long show with some sort of format and structure that's fun to listen to is a big difference from just being genuinely curious about it. And I think that one of the big lessons I learned was if you're asking questions and while the person's answering it, you're just compiling your next question, you're
Oh, man.
screwed, right?
Oh, man. Well, you can see that in an interviewer's face.
Yeah.
See, this is a big problem with people who write out their questions on pads
Hmm.
and show up to the interview with the pad and
Yeah.
their questions. It destroys them in a bunch of ways that they're not cognizant. Number one, what's happening is they've asked the question. Now, a really accomplished interviewer can say, all right, I've asked question number one,
Hmm.
and I'm going to listen carefully. And if I don't see an opportunity to ask a follow up question, then I'll go to question two.
Hmm.
But if you're not that accomplished, you're going to think, okay, I asked question one, I got the answer. Now on to question two.
Yeah.
And if you do that and you're not listening, you're not paying attention, you're not asking the right follow up question, and I can guarantee you that the answers that you're looking for often come on the fourth or the fifth follow-up question, hardly ever with the first question.
Yeah.
So it just really hurts you to have that crutch of the pad in front of you, because it makes you feel like, okay, I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
And I can listen, but I don't have to be paying attention like my ears are as big as satellite dishes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you're paying attention like that, that's when great questions are going to come out of it.
So true. I'm gonna I'm gonna remember that for my own, as I try to get better at my interview skills. That's just such a huge key to it all, And
Oh,
I think
you're doing great right now. This is just
yeah, thank you.
this is
I
just
love
a
it. I just think,
really relaxed conversation.
yeah, I think at the beginning I was also like nervous about, like I said, like you are trying to put out a product now, being a podcast, and so you're so nervous about your own, how you're doing and how the show is. You know what I'm saying? It's easy in the beginning. I'm getting way better at it now, but it was easy for me to get lost in like, I'm creating a show, not I'm just going to have a series of really good conversations, really thoughtful ones that I actually genuinely care about, and a good show will be the byproduct of that. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe I can learn something here. What's going on in your mind when you're thinking about, I got to create a great show?
So when I started, it was, well, how long is it? What's the what's the through line of all these people, but focusing too much on that, right? So if the through line's this, that means I have to somehow not only make Kyrie Irving's story good, but I have to make Cal's story and Kyrie Irving's story somehow have a similar arc.
Oh,
And
you
if
don't
you're
want to do
no,
that.
heck
No,
no.
no,
And if it,
no,
but what I'm
no.
saying is, when you're thinking and sitting down and looking at the iTunes top charts and you're like, well, how do I make a top podcast? Those are the type of things you start thinking, right? I have to create this awesome format. I have to create everything and I can explain it.
You
And
know
all I'm
what?
saying is it's from doing it and from relaxing and from the through lines find themselves. The things that are similar and different find themselves. The great stories find themselves if you let it breathe and let it be a story and a conversation. If you come into it with too hard of an agenda, you're just going to strangle it to death.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, sadly, shows are sold that way. Well, this worked, so we'll
do that 25 times.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be very cool. Like if you look at Rocky. Now, Karate Kid is not much different than Rocky, but they completely changed up the place. They changed the age, and so you wouldn't know you were watching Rocky all over again. They made it work.
Yeah.
But most of that's the one out of 1,000.
Yeah.
The 999 other ones, people can tell this has been ripped off.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. It's kind of sad to see it through that lens. Although I'm listening and learning here, maybe I should be paying more attention to the way I do my podcast and think, well, these other shows on iTunes, top whatever, they do this. Maybe I should be doing it more that way.
Yeah.
I haven't paid any attention to
I
it.
don't think so. I think that there are sort of like things that universally work well, meaning your good intro, explaining the get, whatever that is, right? Your good description. Like there are things that are just kind of best practices. But I think that the reason why all you hear about now is podcast, and you don't ever meet anyone that says, hey, I have this great new radio show coming out, or is because people like this format where you can just have a conversation. There aren't necessarily scheduled commercial breaks. There isn't a structure. People are sick of that. And I think I just came from, I'm just old enough to come from a life before of very structured, formatted things. And TV shows, even when I was doing TV, it was A story, B story, act one, act two, act three, story arc. It was all very thought out, even though it didn't look like it. And so I came into this thinking like, okay, well, what's all of those pieces? And I have to fill all these gaps. But that's exactly the reason people are being more and more drawn to podcasts is because it doesn't have those things, and it is real, and it is, you know what I mean?
Right. And not only that, I'm going to guess what's going to happen. The more and more you do this, it's 2 years now.
Yep.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
your topping 100 episodes.
Yes.
You're going to get to the place where you can just feel,
Yep.
okay, I've got to move this over to where I want to take it.
Mhm.
And you'll be able to do that with a question.
Yep.
And again, if you have a pad there and your pad says, no, question 14 says to do this,
Yeah.
it's not going to enable you to prepare to improvise.
Yep.
And when you have the ability to improvise like that, then you're going to take your show to the most authentic place.
Yep. And it has to stick to what I authentically want to know. I mean, at the end of the day, creating a great show with a great format makes me a content producer, which isn't necessarily what I see myself as and what I want to do, right? A great content producer knows how to create a great format, knows how to schedule, knows how to create a great product. At the end of the day, what I really want to do is have great conversations and learn. And through me learning, people are going to learn with me. So the better I can learn, the better everyone else is going to learn, the better product I have. So as soon as I stop caring about what I'm learning, I become a producer.
You're tapping into something that has been placed in front of me like 2 or 3 times last week.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making me understand like why these podcasts are taking off.
Yeah.
And it's because people want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And when people went to school, it was they were basically told this is what you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Nobody in any school I was ever at had a course on this is how you breathe most efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you improvise.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't exist.
No.
And those radio shows that you're talking about, those have been so structured the same way for so long.
Yep.
They're just doing the same old thing over and over again. And people may not want that anymore.
Yep.
Or younger people that maybe they want to learn in a different way.
Yep.
And the internet has opened this up to them.
Yep.
And so you have a great chance to just sit down and do what I was doing when I was traveling around the world, just getting into these conversations. Only then I was learning about their culture.
Yep.
I was learning about their foods. And you're just translating this through an entrepreneurial lens,
Mm-hmm.
sounds to me.
Mm-hmm. It's just learning sort of, if you sit with 100 people who have all accomplished something pretty cool and ask them kind of how they got there and how they did it, you're going to compile a lot of really good information. And it is the information about what they do when they wake up or how they think about travel or those things that you wouldn't think to write down. You know, but when you leave here, I'm going to be like, man, I learned some stuff. And it's not going to be anything that I would have thought to write on a piece of paper before you came in. It's going to be just somewhere we landed that I was like, man, that game of trying to get people to let you sit, like, what did he, like, that's really cool. I would have never asked that, you know? So I think that people don't learn, and not to go too deep, but I think that that's what's happening with the internet and with all this stuff right now and all this educational type stuff is people don't actually learn the best when it comes to like, here's a list of things to study about history, and there'll be a test on Friday, and you have to write in what you remembered. That's learning.
Right.
Like, that's not learning. You're not growing. You're memorizing things, right? You're not growing or learning how to be a better person. And what's happening on all these podcasts and in books and in stuff like that is you're truly learning how to be a better version of yourself because of something you said today. Some young person is going to say, man, I never thought about just asking the right questions or leading with a question to the heart or blah, blah, blah. That could change the trajectory of their whole life. But you don't learn that on a test or like in school. And I think people are realizing, man, this information is sticking to me so much more than anything I learned in school or through these traditional outlets. I want more and more and more of this.
Because you're able to make an emotional connection.
Yeah.
And a lot of memory. And I know this because I just had Jim Quick, who is a memory teacher to the stars, on my podcast. And his whole point was if you cannot get somebody to emotionally connect with whatever you want them to remember. Could be a fact, could be a feeling. If they can't do it through their heart, then they're probably not going to remember. Which goes back to what I was saying before about always aim your first question for the heart.
Yep.
Because if you're making that emotional connection, people are going to be open, and it sounds like your memory is going to be open too.
Yep.
And I'm thinking really quick now because I haven't thought about what I was doing with a podcast. Basically, Tim Ferriss, he had me on his show, and then when I get done, he said, "You got to start a podcast." And I was scared. I was scared because I was not good at like hooking up wires or doing audio tests, and so I just pushed it away. And he kept at it, and he just said, "You got to do this. You got to do this."
Yeah.
And then as soon as I did it, I said, "Oh man, he was right.
Yeah.
He was right.
Yeah.
He was right."
Yeah.
And to your point, I was able to sit down with Kobe Bryant and have him talk about curiosity. Now, you don't hear that in an interview on ESPN.
Yep.
Or somebody's going to look deep at the way he sees stories. It's just not formatted in that particular TV or radio way.
Yep.
And so this is just an amazing place we're at in time.
Yeah, it truly is. Because of the ability, you've never been able to before do this. Like, it's the fact that a guy who doesn't like to worry about wires or sound checks can produce a podcast that can be served for free to unlimited amounts of people. That's crazy.
And not only that, but to your point where we started, you can be in Akron, Ohio, and you can do this.
Yep.
You don't have to go anywhere to go around the world.
Yep. And you can do it exactly the same that I can do it here, or that you can do it around the world. It's, even with my setup, it's essentially to really match my quality. We're talking about, I don't know, $1,500. And you can match exactly what I'm doing here. Right? And so that's no matter where you are in the world, that's what's so fascinating about it, I think. Because it's real information. It's not, even when you look at like creating all the articles that you did for Esquire and all this stuff you did, what percentage of that was things you learned in school or through some sort of formal training, right? The ability to write, the ability to kind of format these articles. I mean, what really made it magic, I'm guessing, were the relationships and the questions that you asked and the reason why people wanted to sit down with you. And you know what I mean? Like, that's all the stuff. You can learn some of that through podcasts. You don't learn that in school.
I agree. The same way that traveling around the world made me feel comfortable enough to sit next to anybody and ask just about any question.
Yeah.
And trust me on this, Drama. I'm in places all over the world, meeting people I had no idea I was going to bump into that morning. And that night, they're telling me the most intimate details of their life. And why? Because they can't tell them to people in their little town.
Yep.
Because they don't want to be judged.
Yep.
But back in the day, I don't know if it's still like that, but I would come in and then I would be gone.
Yep.
And there was no feeling of this can come back and hurt me. I can tell that something about this guy I can trust.
Yep.
He's going to know this, and they can lift it out of their soul and feel good about telling it. And then I'm gone, and it's not going to hurt them.
Yeah.
I don't know how that is now with the internet and all the communication, but I agree with you. For $1,500, anybody, anywhere can start a podcast and just start communicating. And this is where we're at.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's a way of recycling everything that I had learned through print journalism. But it's not a hard place to start out. When Larry King got started in Miami, he was working for a few hours in the morning as a DJ, where he was talking and introducing music. But then there was a deli called Pumpernicks, and the owner had heard him and basically said, Larry, after you're done with your morning show, why don't you come over to the deli and we'll do another show from the deli. And you just interview people who come in. And that's how he learned to interview. He just set up in this deli, and sometimes nobody would be there. He'd be interviewing the waiter.
Yeah.
But then people in Miami Beach started to hear about it, and then they started to come into Pumpernickel.
Yep.
And then, like, Bobby Darin heard it, the singer, Mac the Knife. He came in to talk to Larry.
Yeah.
And guys in the unions heard it, and they brought Jimmy Hoffa, the union leader, into the deli. And he, to this day, doesn't sit around crafting up questions and putting them on a pad, because his whole style was formed from being in a deli and somebody coming up to him.
So cool.
He has no idea who they are, where they're from. And so naturally, his first question is, who are you? What do you do?
So
Why
cool.
are you here?
Yeah.
And it took him to the top of the world.
Yeah. How cool is that? Let me ask you this, Cal. How in the world, okay, so you travel the world for 10 years. You gain all these skills. You meet your wife. I'm guessing when you were traveling the world, you didn't, in your mind mentally, you weren't compiling skills for anything in mind, right?
No.
Okay. So then you come back. Do you come back to New York?
Well, what happened is when I met that woman on the bus, that kind of ended the trip.
Yeah.
And so we both came to New York.
How long after you met did you come to New York?
It's a lot. That story would take like 5 podcasts, but I'll to just hone in on it. It was a few years because I couldn't adjust to the fact that I had to stop traveling. I mean, you're traveling around the world for 9 years off and on, and you're used to waking up in a different place every day.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's an addiction.
It is. I never thought about that.
And then all of a sudden, you are getting married, and this person who you can't communicate with because she speaks a different language is pretty much expecting you to be there when she wakes up. And so it took me a few years to figure that out. But we did, and she came up to New York. And right at that time, that's when I began to apply all these things I'd learned on buses and trains in interviews with some of the world's most talented, compelling, and artistic people. And those appeared in Esquire magazine. The column's called What I've Learned. And it took me to meet Muhammad Ali and Mikhail Gorbachev and Al Pacino and Richard Branson, hundreds of people. And that, in its own way, was another trip around the world.
I bet.
And so everything that I tend to do in the future, I really have prepared myself with the adventure from the past.
Yeah.
And one has just led me into the next, to the next, to the next. And, now I never really thought that I would be comfortable in front of a camera or a microphone
with a fancy jacket.
And now look at me. I saw this jacket on the rack outside your office, and I said, now that is cool.
Yeah.
And then I saw the camera, and I said, Cal, why not
spice it up?
Look fashionable.
Yeah.
Drama's all about fashion.
There you go, man.
So I would never look as cool as you do in a t-shirt.
Oh, stop it.
No, I mean, it's the truth.
I'm telling you, man, you're underestimating your style.
Nah, a t-shirt, it won't, T-shirt.
T-shirt with those glasses and that hat.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think you underestimate it. When I Googled it, man, I'm telling you, I was like, this guy is stylish. It just shows like positive energy. I was excited, because this came up through Alex, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be great. And then obviously I looked up some of your information. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I got fired up based on your pictures, just because
Now
you just
that's
look,
shocking.
you just look
That
like a good
is,
guy to talk to.
man, that's shocking to
That's
me.
true.
Wow.
Don't underestimate.
Well, maybe I'm learning
There you
something
go.
here. I'm learning this. You know what? This morning, I put my first Instagram video up. And now you got to know before you just referenced Alex. His full name is Alex Benayan, and he's got a book coming out called The Third Door. It's coming out in like 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And I basically helped him work through the writing process. Like, we're talking like 3 nights a week for 3 hours at a time, because he's basically started this book when he was 18 in college, and he realized that he wasn't going to be a pre-med major like his family thought he would.
Yeah.
Had no idea at that point what he was going to do. No, wanted to understand like what the meaning of success is. And so that took him on a journey to want to meet people like Bill Gates and Lady Gaga, Pitbull, people that he saw as successful. And he was able to sell this concept as a book. I mean, the problem is that he had no concept how to write a narrative.
Yeah.
So he ran down Larry King in the street to
I heard
ask
about
him.
that. Yep.
And Larry had him come into breakfast. And when Larry heard he was writing a book, I had helped Larry write his book. He said, Cal, will you spend a few minutes with this guy? And I did. Only wasn't a few minutes. As soon as we started talking, the conversation didn't stop, and it lasted for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And I agreed to help him. What I didn't realize was how much he would mentor me. I had no Twitter account. I had no Facebook account. I had no Instagram account. And even now, I know him for years. I'm still just getting started on Instagram.
Yeah. It's tough.
It was like a big thing for me to post that video this morning.
Yeah.
But I did it. And I think a big part of it is understanding maybe what you're saying is that I should be focusing on visual things. Because up to this point, so much of it has just been revolved around my ears. I'm listening to people. But maybe I gotta see better and use my eyes in an exponential way. I don't know.
I think it's just that the expectations of sort of the expectations of the amount of connectivity you can have with somebody has changed, if that makes sense, right? So before, I think that you could write a great article every week or every month. People could say, oh, that's Cal, love his articles. Great. That's all I need from Cal. I trust him. He's a great writer, great interviewer. Got it. Now they expect to be able to see what you look like. They expect to be able to see what you're wearing. And if they can't get that, it's not enough and they're going to get bored and they don't feel connected to you anymore.
Wow.
Does that make sense? So because everyone else gives it to them.
It's got to be 360 degrees, the whole circle.
Yes. Because everyone else is giving that to them. So the whole like mysterious thing or these things that where we used to have like these superstars that were mysterious and all you did was heard stories about what Mick Jagger was doing and about what blah, blah, blah. Now all these stars, the current stars that are, 18 to 24 years old are Instagramming their entire lives. And so that amount of connection is expected because these young people don't know it any other way. So that's how I would urge you to look at it.
Man, I really gotta hit the gas pedal here.
You do. And I'm telling you that no matter how much you do, it won't be enough. So what I'm saying is not to discourage you, but don't ever think you're doing too much.
Here, okay, this is a great point
Yep.
to look into. When I think about putting out content,
Mhm.
the idea of putting out like the same thing on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, that repels me.
Mhm.
I could not imagine doing something that wasn't completely new every time.
Mhm.
Now, are you telling me I just got to get over this?
Yeah.
I got to get over it.
I'm telling you that the game has switched way more to quantity over quality. So quality still matters. Don't think that that's not the thing, but quality in all of these places no longer matter.
Okay, but okay, let's say somebody has got me on Instagram, they got me on Twitter, they got me on Facebook.
Yep.
And I send out the same basic message to all three at the same time.
Yep.
And now they pick up their phone and they're getting the same thing 3 times in a row.
Yep.
Doesn't that annoy them?
I'll tell you why not. If you take 100% of your followers, let's say on all platforms, I would guess that 20% of them at best avidly check enough to see that same piece of content on all 3 platforms. 80% are drawn more to one platform. So they're going to either be more drawn to Facebook, that's what they check every day, and Twitter and Instagram are kind of an afterthought, or Twitter or Instagram. They aren't thoroughly checking each platform and saying, "Oh, Cal, shut up. I've seen that," right? So you're kind of reaching your Twitter users, your Instagram users, and your Facebook users because they are different people. That's why that's
Okay,
the
so
reason
now
for it.
look at the door you just opened.
Yeah.
Look at the door. All right. So now let me focus on Instagram because today was my first
Yep.
Instagram day.
Yep.
I'm going to put up something tomorrow on Instagram.
Mhm.
All right. Do I need a different visual to make it interesting for those people?
Mhm.
Because if I show up like basically in the same shirt and pants,
Yep.
are they going to say, "Oh, I saw that already"?
No, because that's you,
Oh, I'm
right?
allowed to do that.
Mhm. Because here's another way to think of it.
Now you got me thinking like Lady Gaga.
There you go. There you go. You got to change your outfit, get a new jacket. You're going to have a stylist next month. This is how I would think of it, right? Is when let's just say you write really good articles. Let's say you have a great podcast. And because I just want to focus on one thing for clarity. You have a really good podcast. Quality is amazing. It's produced incredibly. This is what you do. And a lot of people like you and respect that work. Still, when you make real connections with people that you consider friends, they like you because of this quirk, or because you dress the same every day, or because you wore that shirt for 3 days in a row, or because of blah, blah, blah. That's what makes Cal Cal.
Stay authentic.
Yes,
Okay.
and so they want to connect with you the same way. The problem is, like, that's why I keep using the word expectation, because the expectation has moved from he just makes a good TV show, article, podcast, and that's okay, to they expect to know you on that deeper level. That's how they're going to connect with you. And they're going to say, Cal, man, he's been wearing that shirt for 3 days. He's so crazy. I love him, man. Check out his podcast. It's a different level of, you know what I'm saying? They're
Wow,
so
this is
connected.
so new to me.
Yeah.
This is so new. And this is like when I started to have these conversations with Alex, half of it was like Mr. Miyagi showing the Karate Kid
Yeah.
how to write a book,
Yep.
wax on, wax off.
Mhm.
But the other half was him being Mr. Miyagi
Yes.
and basically explaining there's this whole new world out there.
Yeah.
And if you don't get into that world,
Yep.
then nobody's going to know who you are. All these things you've accumulated, this knowledge,
Yep.
it's gone
Yep.
because they can't access it.
Yep.
And I'm listening to you, and what you're telling me is this is way, way deeper than you can imagine.
Way
Cal.
deeper. And not even comparable to any other time in history. Because I think that what happened, like, let's say in whatever, the 1960s, any other time in history, is sure, young people know, they're always going to know what the new music is, what the new TV shows are. They're going to know that first, naturally. But this is almost as if television and radio as a platform is now understood best by 18-year-olds. So does that make sense? So when, let's just say, a new show comes on in the 1960s and all the kids love it, and a new band comes out and everyone loves it, and the older people might think, what is this crazy stuff? Great. But the older people are still the ones controlling the platform. They're still controlling television. They're still controlling radio. What's crazy is right now, these young people are literally controlling Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all young people talking to other young people. And that's the reason why the best example I have of it is, not to go into a negative subject, but all these school shootings and what happened in Parkland. And what happened in Parkland with these kids, the kids that went to that school rallying together and for the first time ever making an impact. It was the kids that did it, the Emma Gonzalez girl and these kids.
Right.
And it was the first time ever that a lot of the topics on these late night shows and stuff were, man, these kids are telling us what to do. These kids are doing a better job than we are. They're saying, please pass laws so that our schools stop getting shot up. The reason why they're able to do it, and I went to the March for Our Lives rally in Washington, D.C., and it really felt like kids ran it, were speaking at it, and the adults were showing up to see how they could help. And that's never been like that, really, in history, right? The reason why is because these kids have a platform now. They are the new Viacom. They are the new, whatever it is, because they're controlling their own media, and there's nobody in the way that has to sign off on it and say, this is approved, this isn't approved.
Oh, man. So basically, I've got to, and I think this is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to think like a 17-year-old.
Mm-hmm. You do. And what that means is just there's no rules, there's no format. You're here to connect. This is what I'm wearing today. Worn it 3 days in a row. Cool. Having bagels with Larry. This is what's going on. Check out my new podcast. Think you guys will love it. And it's like, man, I like that guy. I wish that guy was my uncle. You know what I mean? They want to connect.
You know what?
That.
Funny thing was, I spoke at a college, and afterward, one people were raising their hands, and one of the kids said, "Can you be my grandpa?"
Yeah.
So hearing you say uncle made me feel a little better.
There you go.
I'm getting younger, man. I'm getting younger, drama.
I didn't put you in grandpa category, but that's what you want, right? Is you want these people to connect to you. And you can do that now. The same thing that we just said about why a podcast connects with people more than a formatted radio or TV show is the same thing that's happening on social media. It's connection, it's real, it's what you're really doing, and that's why they want to read your article because they like you and it was supported by good, valuable information. But if they don't know you, they're going to unfortunately listen. They're going to choose someone that they connect with more. Like think about it this way too.
It goes back to aim your first question at the heart. I
Absolutely.
just didn't know where their hearts were.
There you go. Aim your first Instagram at the heart. That's your new motto.
Aim your first Instagram at the heart. What is happening to me?
You have a Letterman jacket on, and we're teaching you Instagram.
Oh man, incredible!
Let me ask you this, because I look up to what you do so much, and part of that is because I'm trying to do something similar with my podcast that you did with Esquire. My question is, when you were kind of gathering the idea for what that would eventually be, what did you have kind of like, this is what I want to accomplish with this? Like I want to...
And this, I think, goes to a difference in the way we're wired.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can tell from the conversation that you think in terms of how do I format this?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I go on a journey, and if I'm lucky, what I love overlaps with what an engineer loves, and that engineer puts up the format for me.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Esquire, was an editor named David Granger, who created this format called What I've Learned. So it was one page in the magazine, simply wisdom from somebody who lived an extraordinary life in his or her own words. And that's it. It wasn't question answer. It was just answers.
Yep.
And then there was a full page picture, very innovative. So you're seeing this person that you thought you had an attachment to or that you knew, and all of a sudden you're reading things that make you think, "Oh, wow, I never knew that."
Yeah.
Or you're seeing them, "Wow, that's a different look." And so I've never thought the way you think in terms of how am I going to structure this?
Mm-hmm.
I've just sort of gone with the flow
Yep.
and know I'm going to sit down with somebody. We're going to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing nothing different than I was on the buses when I met somebody
Mm-hmm.
riding around in the middle of Bolivia.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I'm learning from this conversation is maybe I have to take what you're showing me and really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
Because it's wise to have a format and understand where you're going, as opposed to just going off on a new adventure and hope that it takes you into
Yep.
a good place.
Can I tell you why I feel that way? Is because now, as soon as you plug up a podcast and start plugging in microphones and start recording, you are Cal and Esquire, right? Esquire no longer matters. You don't need a publisher. You don't need a platform. You don't need,
That's right. I am the publisher. Correct.
yeah. And so that's the trick. And I think that what I was saying in the beginning of the podcast is if you go too far into being a producer, you take out all the magic. But at the same time,
If you don't go far enough, you got no
you
frame.
have no, yeah.
Yeah, these are really big questions for me to
Yeah.
think about,
Same.
because I'm willing, I talk often about childhood curiosity and how important it is to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, we're most curious when we're 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, we're asking our parents up to 400 questions a day. Why, why? And then what happens is next year you go off to kindergarten and teacher says, "You got a question? Raise your hand."
Mm-hmm.
And so the childhood curiosity isn't coming out as fast as it did when you were 4. And it has to be that way because you're in a different setting and you can't have everybody just blurting out their whys.
Yeah.
It needs to be a structure, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But what tends to happen is that as things move along, in the beginning, maybe everybody's raising their hands and, "Oh, teacher, calling me. But then after a few years, the hands, they start not to come up.
Yeah.
And then you get to junior high school or middle school, and the fear of saying something that will make you the source of laughter or comedy
Yep.
will stop you from asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to high school and, maybe not be cool to ask the question. And then you go to college and now you're on a job and you're just starting out and you don't understand something. And there's a bunch of people around you and you could ask, how does that work? Or you could say, "You know what? If I ask that, they're going to think I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
This is not good for me." And so the childhood curiosity keeps getting tamped down deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think one of our missions is to constantly just be reaching down and grabbing at that childhood curiosity.
Yeah.
And what I'm taking from this conversation is I got to walk out of here not as a 17-year-old, but as a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
How do I do that on Instagram? I need to look at Instagram the same way a 4-year-old is seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
What can you do with this?
Yeah.
And not be scared of it,
Yeah.
but wanted to dive in like it's a swimming pool. It's going to make a big splash.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of everything we're talking about is we have this conversation. I walk out of that door a different person.
Yeah. And that's what's so incredible. Because you know what else I think people go wrong is they they look at themselves in this moment, at all times in this moment, as complete. And so if I say, Cal, why'd you ask that? Everyone knows the answer is, of course you post on all platforms. A lot of people say, I'm stupid for not knowing that. I'm blah, blah, blah.
Oh, they can call me dumb. Let me.
That's the incredible quality, right? So,
drama. I got to tell you a story. Okay.
Please.
I want to show you how dumb I am about this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When the internet first came out, like I couldn't get it.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm on the phone, like with somebody at some kind of support, just to get like my email set up, like for 3 hours.
Yep.
Everybody does it in 1 second. I'm on for 3 hours. And finally, we both realize that he's been saying .com and I've been typing DOT.
Yep.
COM instead of putting the period. That's how dumb I am at this stuff.
I love it.
And so I'm willing to go back to be 4 years old. I'm willing to ask those questions because, there's a Chinese proverb, ask a foolish question and you're a fool for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask the question and you're a fool for a lifetime.
Yep.
Actually, it's not the foolish question. Ask a question and you're a fool for 5 minutes.
Yep.
Don't ask the question, you're a fool for a lifetime.
Yep.
So for me to ask the question, for you to tell me that, I'm thinking, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I just keep throwing it out there.
Yeah. That's what's so magical about you, though, is I think that like to that proverb, the moment it doesn't matter if it took 3 hours or 3 days, the moment you realized, oh, it's period com, you're the same as the guy who figured it out in 5 minutes. Doesn't matter. It's all over, right? You've learned it. Now it's over.
Still got the scars, brother.
I bet you
still
do.
got the scars.
I bet you do. But what I'm saying is I think that a lot of people are scared to grow because you don't, in the moment, you look at yourself as complete. So anything you don't know makes you, me, Chris, less than you because I didn't know that, as opposed to looking at yourself as constantly growing and evolving. And I think if you can change your point of view, which you obviously don't, you're an expert at this without even knowing it, I think. But if you can constantly look at yourself as something that is growing and evolving and a work in progress and learning and whatever, that's the key. And you don't hang your value on knowing the answers to every question.
Wow. This is slowly becoming a therapy session.
It's funny. That's what Alex said too. Alex was like, man, this is like having a beer with your buddy and a therapy session at the same time. It's so funny.
I'll tell you 2 stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same story.
Uh-huh.
But when I got my first job out of college, it's funny because a lot of this stuff is going back to that time.
Yep.
Time I'm like 21 years old. And I get a job at the Miami Herald. It's one of their bureaus. And my job it was the best job out of college for someone who wanted to be a writer.
Uh-huh.
I just got to write a great story every day. I got to go out and find it and write. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I was so happy. And I go into the office day before I start. And I see there's a camera on my desk. And I pick it up and I walk it into the editor's office. Now, I haven't even started yet.
Uh-huh.
I can't even believe as I'm replaying this into my mind, I can't even believe I do this. But I walk the camera into the editors. This is the boss.
Uh-huh.
And I said, there's some mistake here. Somebody put a camera on my desk. The editor says, no, that's not a mistake. We have 9 reporters and 2 photographers. And sometimes all of the photographers can't get to everybody's story. So we ask you to take the camera along. And if need be, we'd like you to take the photo.
Uh-huh.
And I took this camera and I put it right in front of the editor and said, I'm a writer. And I walked out the door.
Uh-huh.
Now, this is like the day before I started working. This is the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 things happened at that moment. Stupidest decision I ever made. Because it like messes with me now when I'm thinking of Instagram.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I was pushing away technology and I was pushing away images.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And at the same time, what it did was the editor looked down at the camera And the word got out, like, don't mess with the writer. He's a writer. And it inflated me in some way.
Yep.
Everybody knew this guy is serious.
Yeah.
He's a writer. So there was a yin and yang to it. But I can see it's still haunting me
Yeah.
to this day
Yeah.
that I didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, now you can make it all right because you got a great camera
Man.
right in that pocket.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Video camera, slow-mo, time-lapse, you can do it all.
You know what? Just getting a video done is going to be a huge accomplishment. But every day, I'm going to take your advice. Every day, I'm going to say, okay, let me learn slow-mo today.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they got on these things.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get a bunch of 17-year-olds to show me how to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping in.
I love it. I can't wait to follow along. I'm just going to be liking and go, Cal. Go, Cal, go. Great slow-mo.
But the first one today, it's a funny episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's me going to breakfast because I'm changing a lot of stuff. I met a guy named Joe DeSena. He's the CEO of Spartan Races. I don't know, you ever heard of these?
I have, yep.
And so he roped me into going into his obstacle course races.
Uh-huh.
And then as soon as he roped me into that, he roped me into like changing my diet.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'll do this as a test. So for the next month, I'm only eating like raw fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
So my first Instagram post is me taking in like dragon fruit
Yep.
to the breakfast table where Larry King is waiting with his Fiber One cereal. And it's just the back and forth.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a big jump in the pool.
Yeah.
Huge jump in the pool.
That's incredible content, though.
And who knows? I would love to do one with you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
How do we do it?
Whatever we can do. We should really game plan on something good. If I'm going to be doing all this preaching about how you need to step your social media game up, I need to contribute.
You can be my guru.
Yep. I like that.
All right.
Yep.
But like you don't. I will rely on the 17-year-olds to push me along. But every once in a while, I will like show up, bow a few times, and then just say, "Okay, brother."
I'll put a Letterman on you. Put a nice jacket. All right, Cal, let's do this. It's too good.
Oh, man.
Let me ask you this. When you do a lot of public speaking and stuff now?
I do, yeah.
What if, this might be hard or asking kind of a hard to answer question, but like, what's the main through line of the speaking, or what's the main thing that you speak about that you see resonating the most, that you think people are kind of, missing, or when they hear it from you, they're like, oh yeah, that really connected? Is it asking the right questions?
And it's changing your questions to change your life. Because if you keep asking yourself the same questions, you'll kind of know the answer. But if you can flip things around, you can see yourself in a whole new way. It's just what you're doing to me now.
Yeah.
I'm walking out of here seeing myself on Instagram.
Yeah.
I am charged up and I'm juiced. Now, I'm telling you, when Alex Banayan started, when he mentioned Twitter to me, my first words were, Twitter is my kryptonite.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not.
Yep.
Now, like, I put out quotes every morning on Twitter and people are waiting for them.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be.
Yep.
And what you're telling me is Instagram doesn't have to be that way either.
Yep.
And so simply by you shifting things around to me, and you shifted my whole concept of, I don't want to annoy people by putting out similar content across a wide variety of outlets. Now I'm changing the question. Okay, how can I do this in an innovative way so that I don't offend somebody like me who, if you hit me 3 times with the same message, I'm going to look at it and say, all right, come on, brother. I got it the first time. But you made me shift my questions. And so I'll give you an example, and it applies to speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke once, and I had a woman who's the president of an aviation company come over. There's a long line of people. She waits online like 15, 20 minutes. Finally, I get to her, and she's with her daughter. And she said, I really want to get up and speak in front of people, but I can't. I'm too scared. And it's like one of the biggest fears. In fact, I think like on a list of fears, like death is number 3, but public speaking is number 1.
Yeah. Yep.
And I just said to her, all right, let's change your questions here. Can you write out your speech? Oh yeah, I can definitely write out my speech. No problem there. It's not the content. It's just the getting up in front of people.
Yeah.
And I said, well, can you write out your speech and then go up in front of a mirror and give your speech? Just read it off the paper. Can you do that? Oh, I can definitely do that. Can you do that 30 times over and over? Yeah, I think I can do that. Can you do it so many times that you don't need the paper? You're just looking at yourself in the mirror, looking in your eyes, and just repeating what you've just repeated 30 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. Can you then walk out to the kitchen and do that for your daughter? Can you just repeat what you did in front of the mirror? Yeah, I can do that. Now, can you just imagine doing that after you've walked on a stage and you've got 300 people in front of you or 30 people in front of you? And she said, I don't know.
Yep.
And so I said, look, just try it. So about 2 months later, I get an email. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just got up in front of a group. I gave my talk. Everybody loved it. I can speak in public.
It's all over.
And it's really no different from what you just gave me with an Instagram. It's just reframing the question to get you to say, I'm open to diving into the pool. And this applies for somebody in Akron. It applies to somebody in LA, New York, wherever.
So good. You know what I thought about when you just, not to go backwards, but when you just said the how you were thinking about the different platforms annoying people. It's the exact same. It's the modern day equivalent, exactly the same as if you were ESPN and you said, we want to do a nightly television show, radio show, and email blast. Of course, that information is going to be pretty much the same, but it's 3 different.
Yeah, I get that. I got to say, when I'm watching CNN and somebody's giving me the news, and then an hour later, somebody else is giving me the same news with that tape.
And it's all breaking news?
Yeah, it's always breaking news. And it's never breaking news.
Yeah.
It annoys me. It annoys me because they didn't come up with their own. But look, if there's a big story of the day, I get it. And it's to your point.
Yeah.
If somebody hasn't seen the show before, then why should they deprive their viewer of that story? Yeah. So these are things that are circling through my mind. But my difficulty is, since I'm old school, I'm seeing things through such a different lens. And that's why having these conversations is basically propelling me through time and enabling me to see it through a lens that just lets me jump. Go, Cal.
Yeah.
Don't be scared of the wires.
Yep.
Don't be scared if you mess up one of these filters.
Yep.
What's the worst thing that can happen to you on an Instagram tweet?
Yeah.
Now, there may be something really bad that you're about to tell me.
No.
Is there something really bad that I can mess up?
What I was going to tell you is, if you mess up, the best thing you can do is own the mess up. The best thing you can do is say, man, messed up my filter. We didn't have to worry about this in the 70s. It's just like, that's what you connect with. You don't connect with the guy trying to be perfect that messed up. Now you say, ha, caught you, Cal. But if you say like, man, this stupid filter, I don't understand this. It's like, I love Cal.
I can do that.
Yeah.
That I can do.
Yeah. There you go. There it is. Let me ask you this too. Just because you have this crazy like range of sort of experience and knowledge and from speaking to people and going all the way back to where we started this conversation, which is the difference of people who get up, pack up their Honda and move to New York and the people who don't. If you could say what you think the main thing that holds people back from becoming who they really want to become is, what do you think that thing is?
Fear. I mean, and it may result from things that happen in elementary school.
Mhm.
I just did this interview as a podcast. See, I gotta train my mind to think it was a podcast.
Mhm.
It wasn't an interview, it was a podcast.
Mhm.
And I think I mentioned before, his name's Jim Quick. He's a memory expert.
Mhm.
And he told this amazing story about how when he was in elementary school, he thought firemen were the best.
Uh-huh.
And I guess there was some commotion outside. Fire engines were racing by and there was fire alarms. And so everybody in the class ran over to the windows to see what was happening. And he was standing on a chair and another kid pulled a chair out from under him and he fell and his head smashed into the radiator.
Jesus.
And it basically disturbed the way the patterns in his brain was working. And he wasn't the same. He couldn't read or he couldn't read quickly. And then he became really fearful.
Mhm.
So that when everybody in the class had to read and the book got passed along, it would come to him and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it took him many, many, many years to flip the fear upside down into not being able to have your brain work, not being able to remember things or to be able to read quickly, into he became like the world expert in speed reading
Yeah.
and retention. And this is a guy who will have a conference and he'll have 100 numbers randomly thrown in front of him
Uh-huh.
and he'll remember them in order, backwards, forwards, randomly.
Yeah.
But it's because he was able, through a mentor, somebody had to call him out later on in life,
Mhm.
that he was able to just break past the fear and take his pain
Mhm.
and push it to as far as he possibly could.
Mhm.
And now he's sitting and talking about memory with Richard Branson
Mhm.
and Elon Musk, and they want to know what he knows.
Mhm.
And I think that, I mean, that is a heightened example of somebody who was held back for many years
Yep.
by childhood trauma. Now, in the case of a lot of people, and we keep mentioning Akron,
Yep.
but it's sort of our
Reference
landscape for
point.
the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sure there are a lot of people in Akron who, if they do wish they had gotten out to see what the world had to offer, something in their childhood is connecting them to this place. And it may be a damn great thing.
Mhm.
It may be a sense of tradition. Maybe they want to be close to family.
Mhm.
Maybe it's attachment to an ailing parent.
Mhm.
And that's all great.
Mhm.
But if they do want to make that leap, they're going to have to work past the stuff that happened in their childhood before they weren't even thinking about it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And some twist of the stomach is going to set them off, or it may be a meeting with somebody who's going to ask them a question. In Jim Quick's case, it was a guy who, when he got to college, asked, "How's school going?" And it was like the worst question you could ask him
Yeah.
because he couldn't be good at school because he was a kid with a broken brain.
Yeah.
And this person basically just looked him in the eye and just said, "I want you to write down all your dreams." And then Jim did it, not thinking the guy would look at it. And then the guy picked it up and started reading it and said, "You know what? you are this close, and he put his fingers only so far apart from achieving everything that you're dreaming. And it made Jim just go.
Yeah.
And so many people that I interview, I hear the same story. So I think that it may be a case of people who end up staying when they don't really want to stay is because something in their childhood is holding them back, or it may have been something from their childhood that pushed them to marry somebody who wants to stay. And in order to make that leap, you're going to have to reframe your question and ask yourself, ultimately, what do I want out of life? Where is that? How can I get there?
Let me ask you this. You wrote a reoccurring article, What I've Learned, along with many other books. And, we, unfortunately, I wish we had 5 hours. We could actually tell you a real story. But, and it's just fascinating to me that, number one, like, this article's called What I've Learned. And you interviewed some of the most insane people in the world. And by insane, I mean insanely
The
accomplished.
people everybody wants to meet. Yeah.
What have you learned through that process and through all of these processes? Is there any kind of, like, do you live by, or do you have this kind of, like, you know what, here's what I've learned, do this?
Well, maybe what I'm learning is I got to write that book.
Yeah.
What I've learned from what I've learned.
Yep.
What I've learned from all these people. And I think it goes back to something we were talking about earlier, maybe before we started the session, that you can look at somebody and think, I wish I was that person. And really, what you want to say is, I wish I had that part of that person, because you're not understanding the complications of their entire lives. You're not understanding the difficulties, maybe their childhood traumas, which have been kept low and buried away. And so you really don't want to be those people. You want to recognize their humanity and take the best of what they have to offer. A young guy, he sent me an email. He was about to post something on I don't know what you call them. See, I'm dumb. I don't know this social media stuff. It's like one of these places where everybody posts stories.
Okay.
All right. And like he wanted to post it up there. And his point was like, wow, it's amazing to think that Elon Musk cries.
Yeah.
But why would it be amazing to think that Elon Musk cries?
Yeah.
Because he's sending people to the moon?
Yeah.
That makes Elon Musk not cry?
Yeah.
He has feelings like everybody.
Yep.
We shouldn't be looking at these people as if they're not people.
Yep.
They're all people. And maybe that's one of the biggest takeaways, is when you sit down with them, it's all like getting on the bus or getting on the train, and the train starts rolling and you just start talking, and they've lived a fascinating life, most of all because they changed their questions and they took their lives to a place that they might not have seen, or other people might not have seen for them early on. So 2 things: they changed their question, and 2, they took risks. They changed their question to see what might happen, and then they took the risk to make it happen. And even if they went down, like Steve Jobs, when he got thrown out of Apple, he came back.
Sure did.
So it's those are the 3 takeaways: change the questions, and then take the risk. And then when you get knocked down, and they all got knocked down, you come back.
Yeah. You got to write a book.
All right. Well, hey man, let's break down Instagram.
Okay, first we'll start with Instagram. We'll start with Instagram first.
I got my guru, man. I got my guru.
And on that note, what's your plan from here? Where do you go from here? Like, is your goal to keep connecting with people, keep learning, keep teaching? Like, what's your main goal from here on out?
Okay. And this is one of the great things that I've learned from the podcast.
Yep.
I was interviewing Melanie Whelan, the CEO of SoulCycle.
Yep.
And she was telling me, God, this all relates to everything we're talking about. She's telling me, Cal, you got to know your audience. Like, if you're going to start up a business, which I just did without even really knowing what the hell I'm doing, you got to know your audience. And she said, like, at SoulCycle, my competition, people might not realize this, is Netflix. And I said, Netflix? And she said, yeah, if people are sitting on their couch at home watching a great show on Netflix, they're not on the bicycle in SoulCycle.
That's true.
That's my competition. So I have to know when people are coming into SoulCycle, what they're thinking about SoulCycle. And I said, oh man, she's right. So I started to reach out on the podcast to find, I have no idea who's listening.
Mm-hmm.
I've never in all my years as a journalist been conditioned or told to know who's reading my work. Somebody else's job was to distribute it and know that. All I had to do was show up and sit down with Mikhail Gorbachev or Muhammad Ali. But now I'm realizing, to your point, it's more than that. So I started to ask people, like, where are you listening?
Yeah.
And send me a picture. Drama. Pictures start coming in from all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like from like Hong Kong and Dublin and Australia. And I started to go, oh, I'm traveling again.
Yeah.
Only I'm not leaving my seat.
Yep.
And this is what I want to do. I want to travel and be in the same place at the same time and meet all these people. And maybe I can do this on Instagram. I don't know.
You sure can.
I can.
Yep.
Wow. Oh,
you and that dragon fruit just traveled all over the world this morning. You didn't even know it.
Well, one person told me they saw it. I'm at one. I'm at number one.
We're coming for you, number two.
Oh, man.
But yeah, that's the beauty of it. You know, I think that it seems a little crazy and it seems a little like sometimes pointless and sometimes whatever, but that's what it does. It puts you in the ears and the pocket and the face of that person in Hong Kong that says, not only is Cal giving me good information, but I like him. And it's cool. It just feels weird as heck when you're pointing that camera phone around and saying, hey, guys.
Oh, man.
But it's the new way.
It's a new. Well, you know what? What I did is I ordered one of those selfie sticks. Or is that
It's
that
a little
cool?
like, it's a bit of like.
Is that too much?
Maybe a little.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But all right.
This.
I'll send it back.
Do this. No, I would say keep. I don't want to say anything's too much. Keep it. Use it in the right environment. But don't underestimate this. You get your thing, you put your video on, you turn it towards you, and you say, what's up, guys? Here with Cal.
Hey.
Having a great podcast.
That's it.
Yeah. Because they're with you. They're right in front of you. They're with you. And it feels, it's your arm. They know it's your arm. You don't have to try to, you know what I mean? They're not going to be
don't
tricked.
make this professional. Just be yourself, which is everything I've been doing.
Yep.
Oh, man. Well, you know what? That's great news.
Yeah.
I just have to be myself.
That's it. That's it.
And, you know, the last question you asked, in many cases, it would have sent me off to think of, okay, what's the next book you want to do? What's the next job you want to have?
Yeah.
But really, all I want to do is take the empty seat, which I did right here, and have a great conversation like this.
Yeah.
If I could do this 24 hours a day,
you're happy.
I'm beyond happy. It's like nirvana.
Yeah. That's incredible. Tell people where to find you. Tell them the podcast. Tell them that you got to tell them the Instagram.
Okay. I hope you know what? This is
What?
really embarrassing. I think it's just Cal Fussman, or is it, do they do it at Cal?
Sure.
Is
Yeah,
it
but
at
they
Cal
know. If you
Fussman?
put Cal, it's CAL.
Fussman.
Perfect.
And that's my Twitter. I think can it be Twitter and Instagram? The
Yep.
same thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think it's the same for both.
Yep.
And then my podcast is called Big Questions.
Yep. And that's been doing really well, right?
Yeah. It just, well, we had help because Tim Ferriss was the first guest.
Yeah.
And so he put it out through his social media.
Yeah.
And so we got a nice blast. But like what I'm realizing is just what you're saying. I have to think of this like the engineer or the publishing house. I have to grow this. I can't just get in front of the mic and have a good time.
Yeah.
Now I've got to add this other side of my brain to the mix.
Yeah.
And whether that means going back and being a 4-year-old to be curious about it, and then jumping in to a bunch of 17-year-olds, I'm going to do that.
I'm excited.
I'm so grateful to you. This has been like an absolute delight.
It's amazing. I loved every second of it. This is one of those ones that I leave and I'm like, man, I got some new. It just makes you think a little different. That's how I feel.
Thank you so much, man.
Absolutely. We did it.
We did it.
Thank you, Cal.
All right, brother. Thank you. Okay, now the next thing I got to do.
Yep.
I got a checkbook in there. I got to write you a check for this jacket. Or is this like
take that jacket?
No, I got to write you a check for it.
I
What do you mean?
That's a gift. That's a thank you gift.
No, you can't do that.
Yes, absolutely. Let me just make sure. The only thing I got to make sure is that they don't need the sample for anything.
Okay.
If not, it's all yours.
Are you kidding? Because I really.
Now, you see all the clothes we have around
Yeah.
here?
No, but
This I can do.
this one was like, it's like the moment I saw my wife and the moment I saw this jacket, it's the same thing.
You don't mean that.
Guys, if you like that and you want to see more like it, as well as vlogs, other web series, and all the random stuff that I'm doing here on YouTube, don't forget to click that subscribe button. You won't regret it, I promise.